Hey guys, welcome back to the Cast Ice Podcast Network, and I'm here to talk about something that I am super excited about, and that is the release of the long-awaited Victory at Sea box set by Warlord Games. Now, I was sent a review copy of this because I am the host of the Warlord Games podcast, and there is the episode for that coming out very soon. However, let's open up the box and let's look at the ships, because I know there's been a lot of people who want to see what the models look like, what the materials are, and what is all about the contents of this box. Let's take a look. And here we have the Victory at Sea Battle for the Pacific box set from Warlord Games. Now, here we have the box itself, and it is the same size as a lot of Warlord's newer, you almost want to call them a smaller specialist game, not to borrow the GW term, but it is a smaller, more compact core game. It's the same size box, for example, that we saw with Black Seas, Cruel Seas, and other Warlord games that aren't necessarily as big as Bolt Action. And given the size of the models, that makes sense. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a lot of great content in this box. And that's what we're going to get into right now. So if we look, and we will open the box and look at the contents in a second, but the very first thing that you'll notice is that there are 6 cruisers, 3 American and 3 Japanese, 3 Japanese destroyers and 6 American destroyers, making a grand total of 15 ships included in this game, which can allow you to have some pretty decent sized games. Pretty fantastic. And let's open that up and take a look at what happens when you look inside Victory at Sea. Now, clearly, we have the rules. And I will get to the rule book in just a second, but it is probably not what you wanted to see when I open this box. Now, there are 3 baggies of miniatures, and I will do a close-up view of those in just a second. Now, I have opened this box previously, which is why the miniature bags are loose and why this is no longer in its plastic bag. But we have ship cards, which I will take a close look at in a second, damage sliders, 10-sided dice, 6-sided dice, the templates that you need to play this game. There are a good number of templates and counters in this game, but I don't feel like there's too many. And what I like about this is not only do you get ships to play Americans and Japanese, both sides of the conflict, you get 2 movement templates. And you get 2 sets of critical templates, and you get the initiative token to pass back and forth. You get a number of smoke templates so that when ships give the smoke order, that they are able to create smoke to camouflage themselves, give themselves cover. You have plenty of critical tokens here that you are able to punch out and put next to your ships. Clearly enough for a whole game to be played out. Lots of great stuff here. And I do really like these movement templates, and I will talk more about how these work in just a second. We get 2 A0 game mats. Now, these are double-sided, one with a more Pacific, lighter color, and one with a darker Atlantic side. And those 2 marry up nicely to make a really large gaming surface. And it's nice that that comes right in the box, right off the bat. Now, these are a paper substance. They are very thin, but they do have a nice sheen to them. I'm guessing that they will hold up to a little bit of wear and tear, which is always important in a gaming mat. Here's an example of a ship card from within the Victory at Sea box. It's an American ship, clearly you can tell that by the American flag. It's a Northampton class. Now you'll notice that the ship cards are all the class. So we have the Fubuki class, we have the Mogami, the Fletcher class, there's the Furutaka class. All the different classes of ships are here. Now, you'll notice when we get to the ships that those classes are on one side of the one side of the ship's template, and that will tell you, or the miniature itself, and that will tell you what class it is. What's nice is on the back, it also has ships that shared that class and has the name of all of those individual ships. That's important when you're trying to match your ship to the class, because on one side of the ship miniature, Not only is the class listed, on the other side, the name itself. So when you're playing a game, you can easily tell them apart. Now, let's talk about this side of the card. We do have the speed. We have a flank speed, how far it moves in a turn. Its armor, how many hull or damage points it takes. The traits, which are that vehicle's special rules. And then its weapon systems and all of their stats. It's a very nice, all-inclusive card that one card per unit on the board, or in this case per ship, and has all the information you need at a glance. When I spoke to the author on the Warlord Games podcast, that was done intentionally, he said, because the idea is that you are going to refer to the book as little as possible after you get the basic rules down, and everything that you need to play the game should be right in front of you on these cards, which I think is really great. It really reduces the card flipping or the book flipping that happens once you start playing. Now, I did mention that there were these sliders, and if we pop off a couple, the way they work is they are used to track damage on these cards. So if we put them on a ship card, we are able to say, for example, that this ship, as it says on the card, starts with 23 hull points. 23. And then as the ship takes damage, you're able to slide it down. Now, again, I did mention that there are counters for different critical effects that happen in the game that you can put on these cards as well. Again, so you can tell everything that's happening on each ship at a glance, which is important when you are looking at fleet actions, because there's a lot of ships on the board, right? Well, as you go down, I do like this as well. As this tracks down, it goes back here, and it's like an abacus. It keeps sliding down until you've have no more in the tens place, and you get down to 7. You'll notice that it is 23-7. Now that 7 is there to indicate that when a ship gets to 7 hull points, or at least 7 for this class, it is counted as crippled. And that tells you that there are a set of rules for crippled ships that are it's really bad. So you don't want your ship to be crippled. And of course, when you get down to 0, that is when your ship sinks. Now, I should point out that if we look at the back, and I will put another card up that isn't Northampton, since we've been looking at those for a while. Again, here's the Fubuki class, for those of you who want to take a good look at a Japanese ship. I should also point that in the corner, we have the point value for each ship. Now, this is a destroyer. What we were looking at earlier was a cruiser. So clearly, we talked about the cruiser being crippled when it had 7 hull left. Well, the destroyer starts with 5. So you are not going to get very far taking damage with a Fubuki destroyer. If we look at the back, though, what's really ingenious about these cards, and what I really like is, for those of us who aren't really into our naval history, who don't know these things, there's a lot of stats that are put onto the back of the card. General feat, displacement, speed, crew. Tells you a lot about the ships themselves, gives you some more information. But then, of course, the ships in that class by name, a little bit of information about that ship that really helps the novice, and then the refits. So throughout the war, as these ships were refitted, they were upgraded as they went. And so it tells you the name of the ship that was upgraded, or the ships in this case, and then how they were changed. Now, that changes some of the weapons, and that changes or some of the special rules that a ship might have, and it also changes the ship's point values. And so it's one way to track ships over the course of the war, and allows you to play historic battles. Now, if we look at, here's the Mogami Heavy Cruiser. This is a Japanese heavy cruiser. So if we compare that to the Fletcher that we were looking at to start with, the Northampton. The Northampton was 130 points. It's hard to put both of these on at once. This is 280, so it's 150 points more for the Mogami. And so the Mogami, as you can tell, has more weapon systems, and it's got more hull, it's crippled at a higher rate, and it's faster, which, you know, tells you that this is a more technologically advanced ship, possibly, than the other one was. But as you can see, each ship has its own personality, its own stats, and that really will help it to play differently on the tabletop, which is great. Adds variety. All right, guys, let's get to the part that I'm sure most of you are tuning in to see. This is a bag of the destroyers. It's the Fletcher class and it's the Fubuki class destroyers. And as you can see, I am going to show you the ships themselves. Now, there has been a lot of discussion about how the quality of the resin on these ships will be. I know that there was a lot of discussion and comparisons to the Dread game, which is another Warlord game that's come out recently. And a lot of people didn't always like the resins in that. This resin is a harder resin. It's not the flexible resin that was in the Dread box. At least it doesn't appear to be. And it's got some fantastic detail on it. Now, this is, as you can read on the side, a Fletcher class destroyer. That is super crisp detail. You can just see all the details. And if we look on the other side, it has its name. Again, all the destroyers, they're so small they don't have individual ship names, but we'll see that when we get to the cruiser. Now, you will notice that there are guns very clearly on this. You can see lifeboats. There's just a lot of fantastic detail, but there's also a giant hole in the hull, and that is to plug in these comm towers. So they match up. Now, if that is the Fletcher class, let's take a look at the Fubuki class, which is, at a glance, it's kind of hard to tell when you are looking at a stack of ships, and they're all unpainted. But here is a Fubuki class, just like the Fletcher class destroyer. Again, lots of great detail. Guns, you can very clearly see. Lots of little details to pick out with a paintbrush, but nothing that I think is too fiddly to paint. And of course, again, we have a hole that we will plug its tower into. Now, there has been also a lot of discussion about these scenic bases, whether people like them or not, whether they're warped or not. Guys, this is pretty much as flat as it gets. I put all of the destroyers out before on a flat surface, and they were flat completely. I'm trying to get a good picture of that to show you. I'm really impressed. I was expecting there to be far more warping. There just isn't, especially with the smaller ships. Now, we will get to the big ships in a minute. In fact, let's do that now. So those were the little ones, the destroyers. Here are the U.S. cruisers. Now, with these, you don't just get one sprue of con towers that you can put in for a bunch of the ships. Each ship gets its own sprue of add-ons. Let's talk about... Here's the Portland class cruiser. Again, lots of detail on there that it can be picked up with a paintbrush. Some great detailing. And there are plenty of plug-in points for the gun turrets, for aircraft launching gantries. Again, you can just the detailing on the lettering is perfect. The waves have just really great texture that will be pretty easy to paint up. But what you start to get with these ones is, if you look on the side, each one has its own name and the year that the ship was made. So this case, the year that this ship was in the ocean. So this is the USS Indianapolis, but the 1944 version. And again, if we look at this, that is almost completely straight. Now, there is a tiny bend to the Indianapolis. I did notice that. And there's a tiny bend in some of the other cruisers. But put that on the tabletop. That's not going anywhere. Now, if we look, here is the Chicago's sprue. I don't know if you can tell from this. But the gun barrels are very easy to tell. These airplane launching... here we go. The rails that they launch from, maybe if I cover the light, you can see that there is the cross-hatching of girders. The detail is exquisite. It is really clear and defined and crisp. This will be fairly easy to paint. Even though it's very small, the tip of the paintbrush will just pick up those details like a treat. So yeah. So that was the Chicago. So we have the Chicago, we have the Northampton, and we have the Indianapolis. Now, if you look carefully, we have two, as we mentioned before. We had the Northampton class. So we have two Northampton class ships, perfectly identical, except if we look, as we mentioned before, their nameplates are different. So though their class is the same, and though they look the same, if you look at their names, you'll be able to tell which one's which for their cards on the tabletop pretty easily. Now here's another kind of cruiser. This is the Northampton, and it is a Northampton class. We looked at its card before. Again, lots of great detail here. Really, really impressed. Let's look at the Japanese ships. Now, here's the Kumano. Let's see if we can get that. And you should be able to really see, again, really small, fine detail on here that will just be a treat to paint up. Again, the waves and the wake is very easily, is very neatly textured on these bases, which will make it pretty easy to paint. Again, the class of the ship is on its side. The Mogami class. Again, we have another Mogami class here, but just like the last one, it is a different name. It's the Mugami. And, oops, it looks like I have rubbed the end of my ship. But that was me, not the post, when I was putting them back in the bag before. Here we have the Furutaka from 1939. Again, a different class of ship than the other two. And each ship has its own individual weapon sprue that you add the details to make each ship pop. Again, the detail on these is excellent. I was nervous about painting these ships until I took a really good look at the way they came in the box. And all of my fears sort of disappeared because I was able to really see how I could paint these and where the paint would go. Because it is a little intimidating to look at a ship in a brand new scale. Now, let's take a look at the dice. Pretty straightforward. You have your 6-sided dice. You have your 10-sided dice. You get that in a lot of games. So nothing really special there. But here we have the rules from the box set itself. Now, that is the Victory at Sea Battle for the Pacific Rules Manual. Now, this is not a full set of rules. They have said that this is sort of a get started rule set, and it is not some of the giant books that we see from Warlord Games. This is a 30-page rule book. But it has all the rules that you will need to play all of the parts of this game. They're very clearly laid out. Now, when I was preparing for the Warlord Games podcast episode about Victory at Sea, I was a little nervous. I got the rules just before I recorded that podcast, and I was worried that I wouldn't be able to go through and learn enough of the rules to be able to talk about it sensibly on that podcast. However, I was able to read it through a couple of times, and it made perfect sense. I think it's very clearly laid out, and again, like many Warlord games, I think this game is set up to be picked up easily. I mean, all of the ship movement rules are on this one page. Really straightforward. Again, the detail comes in with the special rules that each ship has, and it all comes into these cards. The rules themselves, the basic rules, are very short. Turns 4 phases long, but there is lots of detail that comes in with the cards, with the special rules, with the aircraft. There is just so much subtle detail in here that allows for tactical decision making on the tabletop. Again, full color, great pictures, clear diagrams, and it's really clever in that there's a couple pages of missions, but it gives you a ton of different combinations because it isn't a set of 6 or 12 missions like you see in a lot of Warlord games. It's one mission, but it has variable victory points, variable objectives, variable deployments, and so it really adds up to a lot of replayability. Now, each navy gets a page, and of course, we also have the Italians and the French, who don't have ships at this point, but do have aircraft. And we get a one-page construction guide. And that is it. And there you have it, guys. Victory at Sea by Warlord Games. I'm very excited to actually start to put these ships together and to actually play some games. It does look like, as I said, one of those great Warlord games that has the ability for you to pick it up as a player very quickly, but has the tactical depth that will keep you coming back playing it again and again. I'm a little torn. I know that I just got my Black Seas box as well, and my Sea Monsters box, and I definitely want to paint those, but I also want to play some Victory at Sea. Just with the release of Greyhound and all those great World War II naval movies, I absolutely want to get in and get some of those games in on the tabletop and relive some of those great cinematic moments. I'm hoping to do some videos on that, depending on what lockdown and moving house looks like. Please stay tuned. Again, if you have any information that you would like to, any questions, or if I've said something in this video that maybe isn't correct, or you want to see more unboxings, which isn't usually my forte. Again, if you go to Cast Dice, CASTDICE on Facebook, if you message me there, my name is Brad. Hi, I will answer all of your questions, and you're guaranteed a response. Again, I hope you've enjoyed what we're doing here at the Cast Dice Podcast Network YouTube channel. Please feel free to hit like below and let us know what you think. Have a good one, guys. See you on the tabletop.